Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Derek Pernesiglio Show. I'm Derek Pernesiglio, and we have Lorin Ranier joining us in the studio. Lorin Ranier, longtime, I guess you could say, journeyman in the sport, a talent scout, spotter. You've done everything. I mean, what haven't you done in this sport?
Well, I'm not very mechanical, so I've never been a crew chief or a driver, but I've always been around the sport from the ownership aspect, because both my grandfather and father were Cup owners at some point. Mm-hmm. So that was really my upbringing. Was first of all, is just a love and passion for the sport. You know, it all starts there. Mm-hmm. Is all of us have that? Is the passion and love for the sport? Then second of all, it's really your kind of perspective, and mine was from the ownership side of it and making deals and putting teams together, putting drivers with teams, and just everything that involved.
Now, for the people that are just tuning in and just listening, explain to the viewers and the listeners who your father and grandfather were, because they have been pioneers in this sport.
Right. So my grandfather got involved in NASCAR in the early 50s. Actually, 2022 will be the actual 70th year that my family's been involved in NASCAR. Actually, if you look in like Racing Reference, at the 1952 Southern 500, my grandfather owned the car that finished second. A guy by the name of Johnny Patterson drove the car. Fonnie Flock actually won the race, and they actually finished second. They actually come back in 1954 and finished fourth in the Southern 500. Same driver, Johnny Patterson. So my family had been involved in racing on and off all the way through the 50s, 60s, and even up into the 70s. My grandfather was involved in pipelining, construction, and coal, and in eastern Kentucky. And my dad worked with him, and then my grandfather passed away in the early 70s, I think 1972. And my dad took over the coal company, and then kind of had a big coal boom in the 70s, made some money. He ended up selling his coal company, and that's when he formed what became the 28 car that everybody
Renier Racing,
mm-hmm. and everybody knew as it was Renier Racing, and then it became Robert Yates Racing, and the whole 28 thing. It actually started out the first year, 1978, as the 54 car with Lenny Pond, mm-hmm. and he got our first win at Talladega. But so both my grandfather and father were I would say my grandfather was a prominent owner, but my dad was certainly a prominent owner of his era, being mm-hmm. in the late 70s all through the 80s. He would have been I would say a Rick Hendrick, Joe Gibbs kind of guy at that time.
And you said they had factory backing from Chrysler, right?
What they did in the 60s, my grandfather did actually have some factory support from Chrysler in the 60s. They ran Bobby Watson and Andy Hampton, and were very successful in the ARCA series. And a lot of wins, probably nearly 30 wins in ARCA at that time. And ARCA, was pretty good level of racing through the Midwest.
It was big back then, because
it was through the Midwest. It was, it wasn't NASCAR, but it was, it had a solid following and a good group of competitors. Is
that more when it was more regional, where the Cup Series was more a southeastern-based sport, and then you had USAC and ARCA in the Midwest, and then the West Coast had Winston West? Or?
That would be about right. Yeah, it was more, the ARCA Series would come to the local short tracks and run there, and then they'd obviously venture off to some of the bigger racetracks. They would run Daytona and Talladega and different speedways. They'd come to Charlotte, but you could see an ARCA race at a local dirt track. I mean, they ran everywhere.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It was just, that's what they did, and it was a solid show. You had Iggy Katona and Ramo Stott, guys like that. I mean, just true Benny Parsons. I mean, solid competitors. And my grandfather's team was one of those teams. They were a solid race team back in that era.
And not far off of Cup cars, because you were telling me that you guys ran the ARCA race and the Daytona 500.
Yeah, 1969, Andy Hampton ran, I think he finished third in the ARCA race at Daytona, mm-hmm. took the exact same car and engine, and finished ninth in the Daytona 500 the next week.
Wow.
So it's just really unbelievable to think about it. But that was the era, you know.
And at the time, too, that was, the test of endurance for guys going 500 miles. And he did what was it, a 300-miler in ARCA?
200, I think. 200 or 300, yeah.
Yeah, and then another 500
exactly.
on that. So 700 miles on that engine. It's
Absolutely. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, my God. Now, was Robert Yates building those motors?
No. Robert Yates was not even, I don't, honestly, that stuff probably come from Ray Nichols. Ray Nichols up in Ohio. Yeah, this was long before my dad, or my grandfather. It wasn't. He passed away long before my dad put the 28 team together. So that's when Waddell Wilson and Robert Yates came. In that era.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Skipping around a little bit though, but now, I see you at the track all the time because you are a development, you develop guys. I like to call you a talent scout, really, because there's a lot of times where people have said, what is it that Lorin does? So, let's officially get, your job title of what it is and what you do.
Well, it's a little bit abstract. I mean, I think the thing is what I do is not really tangible because you can't really feel it or touch it because it's more about connecting people. Is really what it is. It's I feel like I have a very good feel for evaluating talent, where talent is, where talent needs to go, and then what and where they need to be and who they need to be with. That type of thing. So, to say what I do, it's not that easy because it's more of a lifetime of this. It's a lifetime of racing and a lifetime of contacts. And a lifetime of knowledge, of just understanding.
And an education you can't buy.
You can't buy it, right? No, I mean, my father put me in position to learn from the absolute best. I mean, I learned more from Waddell Wilson probably than anybody that I was ever around. Just the understanding of racing and how it works. I learned when I got to be around Bobby Allison when I was 15 years old. I got to be around a complete driver, a driver that could win at Riverside, North Wilkesboro, Daytona, Talladega, Charlotte, Darlington. This guy could win anywhere. And I realized what that looked like and how that was. And that made a big impression on me at a young age.
How do you find that combination where you see which this team would be good with this driver and vice versa?
It's hard to, there's no formula. It's a feel. I feel like I get to know the drivers, the young drivers and the parents, and then I get to know the teams really well, the owners of the teams and the guys that do the work, and I just feel like, this group would be a good fit with this group. And that's kind of how I do it. It's not like there's no formula. There's no way to figure it out. It's just me going off what I feel. And
Gotcha.
that's really how it works. It's not so much I'm looking for the team, I'm looking for the driver. I mean, I have relationships with the teams.
Right.
But it's more about, does this driver fit with this team? You know what I'm saying?
To their personality, their attitude, or their approach?
Yeah, all of that.
How hard they're going to work?
All of it. I mean, I can't really...
Can you look at a young driver now and go, he's good, but he's not going to put in the work or the time?
Yeah, you can kind of see that. You can kind of get it a little bit from the family. You can kind of tell where they are, how they've been raised, and kind of their work ethic and, all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's really hard. It's very abstract. It's very abstract, but it's my thing.
I got you.
You understand what I'm saying? It's my thing. It's my field. It would be very hard to teach somebody this because they don't have all the experiences that I've had.
Right. You've got to age and and not that's not taking that's not a knock. That is wisdom.
It's wisdom. Yeah. No, I don't take it as a knock.
Right,
no. It's 40 years of doing this.
Right. I got you. Let's name drop here of some of the guys that you've gotten to the higher levels.
Well, I've worked with a lot of guys. I mean, when you say, the whole driver. And the word development never was even used back then. But when Cale Yarborough drove for my dad from 1983 through 1986, he left at the end of 86 to buy his own team. And so when that happened, we had to have a driver. We had a really good race team. We had Robert Yates and Joey Knuckles and Tony Price and a bunch of really good guys. I mean, just really, really good people. But we didn't have a sponsor and we didn't really have a driver. And really at that point, all the drivers that you could get, we didn't really want. And all the drivers we wanted, we couldn't get. So we had a bit of a dilemma.
So there was like choose between back of the pack guys and then guys we couldn't afford, or
you just
guys
couldn't
who
get
were
'em.
already signed into a deal.
Yeah, you just couldn't get them.
Right.
You know, you couldn't get Earnhardt. You couldn't, you couldn't get Tim Richmond. You couldn't get, you couldn't get those guys. And I just told my dad, I said, Dad, we need to make a guy. We need to take a guy, and he needs to be our guy.
Okay, is that where Davey came in?
That's where Davey came in, right?
Okay.
And that was a unique situation because, obviously his father had driven, Bobby had driven for my dad, 5 or 6 years earlier. And so we had a relationship with the Allisons, and we knew them, and we knew Davey. Davey was a teenager when Bobby drove, but we had followed him, and mainly me, I had followed him very closely. And so I remember, and it was like 1986, around September, my dad and I had kind of debating it one night. Just, he and I was 21, and, I was young and a little bit of a know-it-all, a little bit, because I had my passion. You're 21, that's the way you are. And I just told him, I just wouldn't relent. I said, Dad, this is the future. This is the move that needs to be made. And he said, well, you got to convince me that this is it. So I said, all right, if I got to convince you, I'll convince you. You know what I mean? And we stayed up, I think it was like 2 a.m. or something, like really talking about all the options and things and what could, we do. And then, then we had, obviously we had guys on the team like Joey Knuckles, who was very good friends with Davey, who was lobbying for him too. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So we had
a couple of votes.
Yeah, we had some votes here, and I have to give my dad credit. He had courage, man. He had no sponsor. He had at that point he had a Ford factory deal, and when he said, "This is my guy," he was all in.
And that's when the Texaco Haviland 28 with Davey
That's when it was
born,
That's
right?
when it was born. Yeah, it took a little while. It took about a month up into the season to make it all happen with all the corporate stuff that was going on. But that's how the 28 Davey Allison Ford thing happened. And
did you have the Haviland sponsor before Davey come along?
No.
Okay, so
We
you
had
had to
no
sell
sponsor.
them on a rookie driver.
Correct.
Wow.
My dad had courage. But he believed, one thing about it, he believed in people. He believed in Robert Yates. He believed in Tony Price. He believed in Joey Knuckles. He believed in the people that he had. And he believed in Davey. And he said, if we can get these guys all working together, the potential that they have is really, really good. And he said, we'll get a sponsor. And he just did it. He just did it. And what's amazing is that turned into like a 30-plus year sponsor. They stayed in the sport for 30 years or whatever. And what was amazing, it was a hit right from the get-go. I remember the first test at Daytona. We were at Daytona, and at that time you did private tests, so it was just our team.
Right.
They were testing.
I remember the cars would go down; they'd be completely gray or primed, or just a number on the door.
Or nothing. We had nothing.
Okay.
It was because there was nobody there but us.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my dad asking Robert, he goes, well, how much is the driver hurting the car right now? And Robert went, none. We were running like 209 miles an hour, This was before the
restrictor
plate. Yeah. And because that was the last Daytona 500 before restrictor plate.
Right.
And so I mean that really got me started on the whole, the young driver thing. And what people don't really understand is, the Davey Allison situation really opened the door for the Jeff Gordon situation because and most fans don't know this, but Ford Motor Company is the one that really had Jeff first. He was with Bill,
right, Carolina Ford dealers.
Yeah, it was with
the Busch team.
Well, with Bill Davis,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that was kind of precipitated by Davey. They saw the potential in Davey, and I think that there was a lot of energy there. They're like, hey, Davey can do it. This kid can do it.
And Davey brought it too in that first year. I mean, he'd won races in his rookie season.
Yeah, the
right?
first half of his rookie season. He won Talladega in May of his first, and then went right back and won Dover the same month.
And at that time, a rookie winning in the Cup Series was unheard of.
Well, let alone 2 races.
Right.
He won 2 races. I mean, that was unreal.
The funny thing is, too, if you really think about it, the next guy who won races in his rookie season was another one of your prospects.
Yeah, Tony Stewart.
Tony Stewart.
Yeah.
And that was, what, 99?
99, yeah.
So you're talking about an 11-year window until another rookie won again.
Exactly.
So who do you remember who the rookie was that won before Davey?
I think it was Earl Ross. Like in the 70s, like early. I think he won Martinsville. He won 1 race as a rookie.
No kidding.
I think it was 74, if I'm not mistaken.
See,
he's a Canadian.
And at that moment when Davey wins his first race, what are you and your father thinking? Like,
well, that was a very interesting race because that was the race that Bobby Allison got into the grandstands at Talladega. So, well, we knew at that point we had a shot to win the Daytona 500 that year, and we had a problem on pit road. They'd had a jack problem, and Davey took off without the lug nuts on the wheels, and so we had to pit. And we lost like 5 or 6 laps, and we went out and led the race. We qualified second in the Daytona 500, so we knew we were going to be fast, and we went to Talladega and just put it all together. I mean, it was a tremendous race, and that was actually the last unrestricted Speedway race.
How old was Davey at the time when he ran his rookie season?
26.
20. Old by today's
standards, yeah. But at that time, you had 35, 40-year-old drivers. That's just the way it was. Yeah.
Right. No, I remember.
Yeah. So
because back in the day, from what I had remember is that someone would come into this sport and run, a B or C level car, and they would bounce around in that for a few seasons, and then they would move up to something a little faster, and then into a winning team.
Yeah.
Nowadays you are just dumped right into.
You are, and and in that era, and that's kind of the issue my dad had with Ford Motor Company. They were like, "Man, we don't know if we can support this program with this driver." We're one, probably if not the top Ford program, one of the top Ford programs at that time. And my dad said, "Hey, that's my driver," and they come up midway through the year and shook his hand. I remember at Michigan and said, "Hey, we were wrong about that." You know what I mean?
You're right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So before Davey got picked for the Cup Series, what was he running? He
ran a lot of ARCA. Bobby running a lot of ARCA, but if you remember, he ran some Cup races for that Sadler team out of Nashville.
The same one that Jeremy Mayfield drove for.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, and even maybe Sterling Marlin ran some for him back early.
I think they did.
And then he filled in August of '86. He filled in for Neil Bonnet at Talladega. And I think he finished top 10, maybe 7th or 8th, 6th, 7th or 8th. I don't remember. Davey did. And so it wasn't like he didn't have any Cup experience, but he had won, at that point he'd won a lot of ARCA races. He'd done a lot of short track racing. Bobby had run him for 5 years on short tracks. I mean, they put a lot of work in. Davey was a very, very good mechanic and fabricator. So he worked a lot on his own race cars and had done it for years.
Okay.
So
So it was a ton of late model racing.
Ton of like all pro and all that kind of stuff. He was into that pretty big. He didn't do all that great. He did okay, but I think as he moved up, he just learned more and more, on the speedways from his dad. Being around the NASCAR stuff. And one thing about Davey that I always remember is he was very tenacious. You know what I mean? Like he just had a lot of drive, and he was very in tune with what was going on with the car. Even his dad's stuff. Like he knew what they were doing, why they were doing it, what the results would be. Like he was in tune. Davey was. He was on it.
Do you think he would have made a good crew chief or team owner?
I think he would have. I think he would have been a multi-champion.
Yeah.
I think he would have been probably a 3-time champion, and he would have been a good owner, a good crew chief, good anything. He just was good. I mean, and he was smart, and he was. He just understood what was going on, and I'll tell you what he did is he really paid attention to what his dad did, good and bad. Like he just had an understanding of what to do, even like with the fans. Like like Bobby, Bobby was really well liked by the fans. Mm-hmm. Davey was loved by the fans.
Right.
They loved him.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew how to handle himself because he'd seen the mistakes his dad had made, and he knew the good things and the not so good things.
Well, Bobby had moved around from a bunch of different teams in the 70s and the 80s.
13 different owners.
Do you think he would have won more than one champion had he had just stayed in one spot?
My dad used to say, had Bobby stayed with Junior Johnson or a team like that, mm-hmm. they would have said King Bobby instead of King Richard.
Really?
That's how good he was.
And why did Bobby bounce around so much?
Just hard-headed, stubborn, had his own ideas. You know what I mean? If he didn't agree with you, then he wanted to do it his way. I mean, he drove his own car for a few years.
But everywhere he went, he won, though, too.
Everywhere.
Right? Yeah. So
everywhere.
Which is hard to argue with.
It's hard to argue.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, people are who they are,
Right.
So.
Well, so that is basically, the Davey stuff is basically for you laying the building blocks for finding talent, I guess you could say, because how did you, being a stock car guy, start leaning towards someone in the open wheel world like Tony Stewart?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but so my dad sold the 28 team to Robert Yates at the end of 1988, and a couple of years later, I was like, I really had the ambition to get back into NASCAR. I was in my early 20s, and we actually tried to do a deal with Cale Yarborough and buy his team, the Trop Arctic, the Phillips 66 team. Mm-hmm. This would have been around 1991, and at that time, Jeff Gordon was driving for Ford, and we were talking to him and Bobby Labonte were the two guys that we were talking to about buying Cale's team and having them drive. And so a bunch of different things happened, and that deal didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So it was the end of 1991. So I told my dad, I said, just give me some time and let me just kind of look all around the country. I said, I'll find a driver that we can build a program around.
So you're thinking, let's do what we did with Davey.
Exactly.
Find a driver.
But the problem is we didn't have the organization.
Build one.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but I said, first of all, we need to find somebody we can work with, somebody we can build a program around. I mean, I think we had good ideas, not real good execution, meaning we weren't really financially set up to do what we needed to do. So we had partners in this program we put together. It just didn't quite work out. But we did sign Tony in 1990. I went and saw him in 94. So it took a couple of years. I mean, we were out of racing for a while. Mm-hmm. And
what were you doing in that time?
In Kentucky. I was in training racehorses. My dad was pretty much semi-retired. He had went through some serious financial stuff with the coal business that he had to clean up. So he had some, he had some stuff to do. He had homework to do to kind of get his self. So he was, semi-retired. He was nearly 60 years old, and he had kind of done everything he wanted to do in racing. But I was gung ho, and I wanted to do some stuff. And
you're still in your 20s.
I'm in my 20s, early 20s.
Right. So you're thinking, what am I going to do for a career?
What am I doing? Yeah, because I thought I was going to be involved in NASCAR, and I trained racehorses as well, and I thought I was going to be involved in that. All that went away. So, my whole world kind of blew up in my 20s. So I just had to figure out, okay, well, what's next for me? He'd already done everything he kind of wanted to do. So I'm kind of like, if I can pick one thing, it's going to be NASCAR. Mm-hmm. If I can pick one thing in life, it'll be NASCAR. And so I have to give my mother credit, because she said, well, if you want to be in NASCAR, you need to be in Charlotte, because we were living in Kentucky at the time, in Lexington. And so I moved to Charlotte, and we worked on this program. I went in 94. I went to the Four Crown in Eldora and met Tony. I'd been watching him for about a year, actually, and went and talked to him. And I said, you interested in doing any stock car racing? He goes, hell yeah, I am. So we kind of developed a friendship and had him come down, and we, worked on some stuff. It took about a year, and then we had some partners from Florida, and we put a little Busch program together and ran him a few races. And then he was doing that along with the IndyCar stuff with John Menard. This was 96. And lo and behold, it was about midway through 96, Joe Gibbs calls my dad and says, I'd like to buy Tony Stewart's contract. And that's how Tony ended up at
So your dad held Tony's contract?
He did.
But he wasn't in racing? Or
Well,
it was just a
we
business deal?
Well, no, we had a Busch team. So we signed,
okay.
So we signed Tony to a 3-year contract, and we started this Busch team.
Okay.
And that was 96. So we were running a few races, not very well, but we run a handful of races with Tony because he was doing IndyCar, USAC, and NASCAR all at the same time.
Right.
So in my mind, I was like, I want to make this guy the next Parnelli Jones. You know, he can drive anything. The next AJ Foyt, you know, he can do it all.
Which he can. Yeah.
Right. He proved many times that he could. And so Joe Gibbs called my dad. We went and met with Joe, and Joe ended up signing Tony. He bought Tony's contract.
Really?
So that's how he ended up with Joe Gibbs Racing.
But before any of that happened, there's an interesting story behind Tony coming to NASCAR because he had also had an offer from AJ Foyt, right?
He did. At the same time, right, he tested for AJ Foyt, and this would have been in 95. Yeah, because that's the year he won the USAC Triple Crown, was 95. So he tested for AJ, and then he had been working with us for about a year. So he had to make a decision. You know, do you want to go IndyCar racing or do you want to go NASCAR racing? And at that time, I just don't think the long-term situation with AJ was that good, and we felt like we could give him a better opportunity. And he picked us over AJ.
It's a big decision.
It's a big decision.
You know, everyone knows AJ was Tony's hero.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. A lot of people's heroes. And but no, he had to make a decision, and he chose wisely. I mean, for the longevity of his career, I think he made the right move. You know, because he ended up getting to do both because Kerry Agajanian was representing him at the time, and Kerry ended up working a deal with John Menard, so he ended up running the IRL and NASCAR at the same time.
Yeah, he did win an IRL championship.
He did. Yeah, 97. Right. So so he made the right move. You know, I wish we could have done a better job for him, but I think my dad and I realized very early, really early, that it's like we have way more driver than we have organization at this time because we were just starting over. We had nothing.
Was this wasn't the 44 shell car?
No,
right?
No. That was after that.
Okay.
That was Labonte's car.
Right.
Gibbs did a deal with them. This was the number 15. It said Mariah Entertainment, and then it had no sponsor on it. It was a white number 15 that he drove in 96.
Okay.
And we realized at that point, it's like we have way more driver than we do organization. And then Joe came, and it's like, so we made a deal, Joe, to buy his contract. And because I told my dad, I said, look, we're gonna hold back. If we don't let this guy go, we're going to hold back one of the greatest American race car drivers.
Right.
You can't do that. We can't do that. We can't do that to the sport. You know, this guy deserves to be at a Joe Gibbs Racing.
It's pretty big of you to think of that in that broad of a perspective because nowadays with the money and the way the teams are, you know, if you're signed into a contract, you're locked in.
You know, I agree with that to a point, but I think we all have to do what's best for the sport long term. You can't be looked at like that. I feel like my dad had a really good reputation in racing as an owner. He did a lot of good things, and I think you have to continue that thought process. And you know, Joe paid amount of money to get Tony out of the contract, so it wasn't like we just gave him to him.
Right.
So, you know, it was a business deal. Mm-hmm. You know, it looks cheap now compared to what it did then, but you know what? It was all done correctly. And we would have hindered Tony's career had we not done it.
Now, did your team fold after that? We
ran half a season of Cup in 97 with Greg Sachs, and then it folded about halfway through 97. It was called Renier Walsh Racing, and these guys in Florida were really the funding behind it. And I think they realized how hard sponsors were to get, and they basically just stopped funding the program, and it ended up shutting down.
That is one of the hardest things to do.
Without a doubt.
Oh my God.
Well, you think one thing, and then you get involved, and you realize this is really hard.
Yeah, I'm working for a racetrack now, you know, and one of the things that they would like me to do is find sponsors for them. But it's like, how do you know, it's very hard to knock on someone's door and go, hi, can you give me some money so we can go play? And cold
calling is very, very tough. You better have a relationship or a contact or I call it like a center of influence to make something like that happen. Very hard to do.
So with all of this going on with the finding Davey and then discovering Tony, what kind of are you at this point realizing I'm putting together or putting a pattern together of being able to cultivate talent in this sport?
I knew I had a feel for it because I was 2 for 2 at that point. You know what I mean? I was 2 for 2. Well, really 3 for 3 because we were really going to cut a deal with Jeff Gordon when we did Cale's team. So I had at one point I had Davey Allison, Jeff Gordon, and Tony Stewart in my hand.
Wow.
So I was really kind of 3 for 3. I really never got to work with Jeff other than, we talked about doing a deal. That was about as far as we got. But he was all in, and John Bickford was all in at that point as well. Okay. You know what I mean? That was 1991. So I knew that I had a feel for it. I was down here just trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I really enjoyed spotting. I just enjoyed it. I was late 20s. I was around 30 years old then. And I said, you know what? I want to be a spotter. I feel like, I've watched one car my whole life. And so I started spotting, and I had an opportunity to spot for Jerry Nadeau. He worked for Bill Elliott. And I spotted for Jerry Nadeau for about 5 or 6 races. It was really funny.
That was the Dan Marino deal,
It
right?
was.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was the Dan Marino, Elliott Marino. And I spotted for Nadeau for about, must have been 5, 6, maybe 8 races. And then Cindy Elliott comes to me and says, she said, I don't want you spotting for Nadeau anymore. I'm like, why? What did I do? I mean, I feel like I'm doing a good job. She goes, you're too good. I want you spotting for Bill. So she moved me to Bill.
Oh, no way.
So she moved me to Bill. So I started spotting for Bill Elliott in 1998. And so I did that for a couple of years, all the way through. See, 98, 99, 2000. And then I went to work for when Chip Ganassi came into the sport in 2000. He bought Felix Sabatas out, Sabco. So I was a part of that process. Andy Graves, I developed a really good relationship with Andy Graves, and he allowed me to be a part of that, and I kind of helped facilitate the engine program that they had with Ernie Elliott, Bob Fisher, and Tony Santanicola, and the Dodge deal that they had. I kind of helped facilitate both of those deals when Chip came into the sport in 2001.
Right, with the Dodge
with
program.
The Dodge program, yeah. So I was very heavily involved in that, and I ended up being Sterling Marlin's spotter for about 3 years. So when Sterling was winning all those races and pulling the fender and all that stuff at
That
Daytona,
was you?
I was a spotter then.
Oh.
Yeah.
So who did someone tell him to get out of the car and
No,
Daytona
he did
when
it.
he
Well,
pulled that fender?
the whole thing was this. So they have the red flag, and the fender is rubbing hard on the tire.
Right.
He has to pit anyway, right? So everybody gives him a hard time over this, and he really doesn't deserve it, because he gets out of the car and he goes, "Hey Glover, I'm gonna get out and look at this fender." Well, he gets out and he sees it's all over the tire. There's no way that he can race it because it's going to cut the tire.
Right.
What's he got to lose? I mean, he knows he can't do it.
He knows he's got to come in.
He's got to pit anyway.
Okay.
You see, what if he gets one good tug on it, gets it off the fender, or gets the fender off the tire, and he wins the Daytona 500,
right?
And he got away with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had nothing to lose. I mean, people give him so much, but the tire was gonna be cut.
Yeah.
There was no way to get around it, and I'm on the radio when he's out of the car, and I'm like, Glover, he can't do that. He goes, yeah, I know. He can't.
Exactly what Benny Parsons said on
He's
TV.
Like, he can't do that, But I have to tell you, that was probably some of the most fun I've ever had in my life, was working with Sterling. Lee McCall was the crew chief, and Tony Glover called the races. That group of guys were just amazing. Tony Cola was the engine tuner. I mean, we just had a really great group of guys that Andy Graves had assembled for that team, and it was so much fun. We were competitive. I mean, everywhere we went with that Dodge program with Sterling in 2001 and 2002, we were competitive until he ended up getting in an accident and breaking his neck. Right.
But then you put McMurray in the car, and he wins in his second race.
And
out.
I spotted that race. Yeah, I did. That was a big win. Yeah, and I was a part of that whole process, the whole McMurray process back then. So
wait a minute, you talent scouted him too?
With Ganassi. Yeah, I was part of that, and Reed Sorensen and David Stremme and all those. Yeah.
So while you're spotting, you're also scouting for these guys?
Yeah, for Chip. more for Chip. And I did, as time went on, I did kind of have two jobs. I worked with motorsports management with Kerry Agajanian.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with him a little bit in the late 2000s. So I always had a couple of jobs. I'd work with consulting deal with Chip, and then I had a deal with MMI as well. So and then I went on and worked with Spire as well. It gets into the whole Kyle Larson thing and all that stuff. So, but yeah, those couple of years that we had with Sterling, God, that was so much fun. I mean, I just couldn't wait to get to the racetrack every week because we knew we were going to be fun. We knew we were going to be fast, and we knew we were going to have fun. We just knew we were going to have a good time because that's Sterling. I mean, you're just going to have a good – I mean, he's just fun to be around.
Is he?
Yeah, he was the last of the old throwback, the old school 70s style of driver. You know what I mean? The good old boy driver. And he was just fun to be around. And we were competitive, and it was fast. And, we had a cool – to me, one of the best-looking cars ever.
That was a cool
was
car.
that Silver Bullet. I mean, that car was just – and to spot it, you could see it from a mile away because it was silver with Dayglow numbers on it. So for me to get to spot that car was so much fun. I mean, just I think back about it and think about how that was like the pinnacle for me in spotting was to get to work with him and to do that. So it was fun. And then to win that race with Jamie probably was the pinnacle because in all reality, Jamie ran Talladega. They call it his second start, but the first race was a speedway race. Mm-hmm. In all reality, it was his first race in a normal type of race, not a speedway race.
Right, yeah, because I remember that because Talladega was the first race, and then a week later he ran
Charlotte. Yeah.
Now, what makes with doing the spotting, what makes a good spotter?
Well, that's. I think you have to have a really good knowledge of the sport, right? A good understanding, a good general understanding of what's going on. I think a lot of ex-drivers make good spotters. I never was that. I just was around racing all my life, and I feel like I just had a good knowledge of racing, and I had a good eye for racing because it's funny the 2000 and 2001, I was actually Jimmy Johnson's spotter in the Busch Series.
Okay.
So I helped develop Jimmy Johnson as well at the same time I was doing the Sterling Marlin thing.
God.
Yeah. So.
Who haven't you worked with? Right?
Yeah, that's true. Exactly.
That's the question.
Yeah, and so Jimmy would give me credit decade later about working with me back then because I was so just on top of him. Like, this is right, that's wrong. Like, he'd make a mistake, I'm like, that was wrong. Mm-hmm. Immediate. You know what I mean? Like, correct it now. That type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I gave him a good understanding of how to race this style of racing. There was no doubt he had amazing talent and speed. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. But it's understanding when to use the speed, how to position yourself. I think that's what makes a good spotter is just, being able to relay information that's useful to the driver. And another thing being a good spotter too is trust. Because the minute they don't trust you, you're done.
They're not going to listen to you.
No, you're done. They'll fire you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're done. It's not they're going to listen to you. If they're not going to listen to you, they don't need you.
Yeah.
So you're done. So I felt like I always developed that sort of relationship with all the drivers I worked with. Because I'd call them out on things. If they made a mistake, I would say that was a mistake. Even older drivers like Sterling and guys like that. If I worked with a driver, an experienced driver. Even I spotted for Jamie for a long time, right, for seasons, and I would be like, man, that didn't look right. That wasn't good, that type of thing. And honestly, I think they'd appreciate that. Because to me about the driving part of it, and by racing, you've raced. If you do something and it feels right, that's a good feeling, right?
Right.
But if somebody tells you that it's right and it feels right, that's confidence.
Yeah, it solidifies it more.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's how I would work as a spotter. Mm-hmm. I would see it like if just out of the blue, if I saw them make a corner, they'd come off two. I'd say that was a good corner, just out of the blue. Not. There's nobody around you. There's nobody. But like what you did right there was good. Mm-hmm. So that boom registers, or that is like they'll come off the corner. I'm like that didn't look right. That wasn't right. Rethink how you did that because that just. the angle of that wasn't right, or the way the car's pointed wasn't right, or
how they arced it
or whatever. I'm like, don't do that one again.
You have a really hard job, because I've tried spotting before, and not only do you have to watch your car, you got to have eyes in the back of your head, because you have to know, like, who's on what lap, who came in and pitted it, who has fresher tires than who.
You do.
It's a huge mind chess game.
It is. And I'm really glad I don't do it anymore. Honestly. No, I am, because I really respect the guys that do it now. Yeah. I'm very good friends with all those guys still. Matt Hirschman and Derek Nealon and all those guys, Mike Herman, and I'm friends with all those guys, all of them. Eddie DeHunt,
How many fights have you seen up in the spotter stand?
It's you get a little bit of that, but I think there's a lot of respect. I think what happens is you'll get people that get upset with guys that do really dumb things. Like if you'll get an inexperienced spotter with an inexperienced driver and they do something really stupid, that's when the veteran guy will go over to him and just literally tear into him. They'll just rip them. And honestly, they kind of deserve it, because if you're going to be at the cup level, especially, don't go up there if you don't know what you're doing. Don't do it, because it's just not. It's very unproductive if you go up there and you don't know what you're doing. You need to hire somebody that knows what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Don't send somebody up there that doesn't have an understanding of what's going on, especially like when you're trying to do qualifying runs and they pull out in front of other people and they just don't understand, what they're doing. So not a lot of fights. A lot of heated words, but you know what? The spotters are not driving the cars. Right. All you're doing is relaying information. And then really the thing you have to realize, a spotter is a safety device. That's what it was intended for, is for safety. So that's your main function you've turned into a competitive device, but you're a safety device is what your first function is. And that's what I always try to remember is I got to keep this guy safe. And that's the most important thing. I'm going to do what I got to do to get him around the racetrack faster, but the first thing I'm going to do is get him around the racetrack safely. And that's what you have to really remember. And a lot of guys sometimes lose focus of that.
At what point do you start to move away from spotting in the Cup Series full time and start working in these other development series like ARCA and the super late models?
That all started really. I started working with MMI late 2000s, and I went on over to Spire. I worked at Spire doing a lot of development for those. So I found myself spotting Cup races and thinking about development. That's not a good combination. Meaning, when you're spotting, you need to be 100% focused as a spotter. Okay. Not as what you're doing. So I started drifting away from the spotting probably 2012, 2013, 14. And so finally in 2015 was my last full season of Cup spotting. I did a little bit of it after that, like if somebody needed a fill-in or, like when Matt Kenseth, when his spotter got hurt in a car wreck, I spotted for him at Daytona. I'd like to have that race back, actually. But, I just felt I was losing a lot of interest in spotting. I really wanted to do development. And then I got involved in a development team. In 2016, it was that MDM team, and the first year was actually Renier racing with MDM.
Right, I remember that. I was there. I was in the pit area.
2016, right. And so I was part of that program for a couple of years, and then I started working really closely with Chevrolet and Driver's Edge, and did that for a few years with Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Zane Smith. All those guys were all my guys. So directed all their careers, and up to what I'm doing now is working with Chevrolet now full time.
Now, how hard is it when you are developing multiple guys and they're driving for different teams and they have an issue?
You just you deal with every situation as it is. If they have an issue, you work it out. I don't dictate what happens on the racetrack. They do. My job is to put them in the best possible position to get on the racetrack. Best team, best driver, or best crew chief, best, put them in the best environment. What they do on the track is their business. I don't tell them what to do. It's, I want to get them in the best environment they can be in, and so they can reach the level of talent that they have. That's what I try to do.
And the Cup Series is a grind. I mean, you guys are gone for weeks and weeks on end.
Well, it is, and that was part of it as well. I had 2 young sons, and I really never got to be around them much. They're up in their teens now. I was really tired of the Thursday through Sunday grind, and I kind of wanted to be more on my own time and work with the developments. I've been going to all these racetracks since I was 5 years old,
right? Since
the 70s, early 70s, and I did almost 20 years of spotting from around 95 with Tony, 95, 96, all the way to 2015. So I did about 20 years of spotting, like from age 30 to 50, and I was like, that's enough spotting. I did that. And so I wanted to just get into this development and do this development stuff, and I really like it, and I love what I do now. Like I love working with the parents. I like working with the kids. I love seeing the progression. I love helping these kids and parents make decisions. I love working with Josh Wise and Eric Warren and all the guys at Chevrolet. I just really like what I do now. It's so rewarding to get to see these kids move like they move.
Well, that, and also you're not constantly, I should say, married to this one thing. You get, instead of having an 8-day-a-week job, you have a 5-day-a-week job, right?
Well, I have an everyday job because I live it every day. It's a lifestyle, but I love it. I can't wait to get up every day and go to the shops and meet with the teams, and then go to the racetrack on the weekends and watch the kids progress and watch them race, and just the lingo of it, the talk of it, the feel of it, the life of it. It's just the life. I love the racing life. Yeah. I don't know how to explain it any other way, but like, I'm getting paid to do something that I love. I mean, it doesn't get really any better than that. You can't do much better than get to do something you love. You get to help young people achieve their dreams. You get to watch parents see their kids achieve their dreams. I mean, that's just about as rewarding as you can do. So
it's nurturing. It's nurturing.
It's nurturing, and what I tell everybody, when I meet with somebody, is, and this is all that I can give you. I've got 40 plus years of experience in this business. What would I do with your son or daughter if they were my son or daughter? That's all I can give you. What would I do if that was my son or my daughter? That's what I'm giving you.
Right.
I can't give you any more. There's nothing. There's no more in me.
Right.
Than that.
We're seeing, with the development of these drivers too, like different tools they're using for getting better. Like the iRacing is huge for a lot of these young kids.
Simulators.
We hear a lot of the simulators. How do you have any involvement with that, or trying to get them into the virtual racing?
More with our Chevrolet program. Josh Wise kind of handles all of that. He makes all that happen. I'm more the ground game at the short tracks and at the shops. That's really where my influence is, and that's really my sweet spot.
Is that like a boots on the ground thing?
Yeah, kind of in a way, but because the thing is, you can't evaluate these kids unless you're there. And I try to make as much time as I can to physically watch these kids race. I don't want to watch videos. I want to watch the race. I want to feel the race and feel where they are and feel the stress. And you know what I mean? I want to be there. That's why you'll see me at, all these short tracks. And honestly, Derek, I love it. I mean, I love being with these kids, with these parents, with these teams, and giving what I can give to watch those kids progress.
And they put on a show too.
Yeah, and they win. Yeah. When you put them in the right spots with the right people, with their talents. Look at the year William Sawalich has had this year. It's incredible. But he's with amazing people. He's an amazing talent. And he's won races all over the country for all different teams. Yeah. It's just, he's 15. it's incredible.
I know,
you know what I
right?
mean? It's truly incredible.
Probably started when he was 5, though, right?
Well, no, he started when he was 9 in a quarter midget just for fun. He's not a racing family.
Okay.
Yeah, just something they did as you know, that, hey, you might like doing this. And just, you know, it's just been amazing. And, you know, just to get to work with all these things, like what Katie Hettinger's done. You know, she's just turned 15 years old, and she's won more races at Hickory Speedway than any female driver in 70 years. She just turned 15.
I was reading something like that in the social media post that she was doing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Katie Hettinger. Is she related to Jim Hettinger?
It's his
the
granddaughter.
Open Wheel? Oh, it's his. Okay,
It's his granddaughter.
I used to watch him on Thursday Night Thunder.
Oh,
and all
absolutely.
that. So, how far down the grassroots ladder are you going? I mean, I've seen you at the ARCA races, the super late model races. Are you even going down as far as looking at go-kart kids?
Yes. Well, we have Connor Zilic out of the karting. You know, he's one of the top karters in the country. He just turned 16, and Connor Zilic is one of the best go-karters in the country, in the world for that matter, not just the country.
Really?
Yeah. So he's on the Chevrolet program, and it's just incredible. There's so many talented kids out there, and you know, you just have to kind of find the ones that fit, and you think that have the possible progression to make it up and make it through.
So you guys are looking even at some of the first rungs of racing for
I think you have
talent.
to, because I think with where the sport is headed, you know, don't be surprised to see 19-year-old cup drivers, 20-year-old cup drivers, like kind of like what Kyle Busch did. That could be the normal in 5 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of believe it because, you know, the average age is dropping lower and lower.
It is.
One of the let me ask you, though, when you are looking for a driver, I mean, obviously there's a lot of kids out there that can drive them.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of kids out there that can drive them and work on them. Is
True.
that something that you think is an added help, or it doesn't matter because it's just the driving for you?
And again, I think you have to take every driver individually because, you know, you look at a guy like Kyle Larson, doesn't know really anything about a car, just can drive it. I mean, just can do it. You know, just a natural ability to do it. So I don't go this like you. There's no have to this, have to that. I look at every driver's situation, and then I just go off the feel that I have with it, and then go with it. That's really what it is. I mean, you look at a kid like, you know, you've had on the show, Carson Quapple. I mean, that kid can build a race car.
Right.
And he can drive one as good as he can build it.
Right.
I mean, he's a wheel man. He's an animal. And but he can get out of it and tell you what to fix. And there's other drivers that says it's tight or loose. And they do really well also. So I don't pigeonhole them that way because everybody's an individual. And you have to rate them on who they are. Just because they're not that good at, you know, this doesn't make them a bad race car driver. I mean, you look at a guy like Bobby Allison and a guy like Cale Yarborough. Well, Bobby Allison could build the engine. Cale Yarborough, I don't know that he could do anything on a car.
Really?
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Nothing. Like nothing.
Even back in that day, in that era when you had to work on your own stuff, he didn't know how to work on cars?
No. He
Really?
drove them. He just drove them.
No kidding.
Yeah. And that's just the way, you know, that's just the way it was. And then you look at him, he won 83 races. Bobby won 85. Cale won 3 championships. Bobby won 1.
Right.
I mean,
and one could build stuff, one
couldn't. Yeah.
Wow.
But I can tell you one thing. When it come to inside that cockpit, he knew exactly what he had to do.
Gotcha.
And that's where it counted for him.
Wow.
So, you know, he was around the right people, around the right crew chiefs, around the right teams, and they provided the product, and he got in and got the job done. He did his job. So I just don't, you know, I think everybody's an individual. I think you just have to look at it that way. You know, it's not, you know, well, if he can't do this, we're not interested. That's just not how it works.
Gotcha. So you're involved in the Chevrolet program now. First, how's that been going? And then number 2 is what are the types of drivers that they're looking for?
Well, how's it been going? It's in its infancy. So this is the first year. So we have a group of kids together right now. And younger, definitely teenage, really from about 14 to say 19 would be the age. It's not like we're looking for drivers up in their 20s, that type of thing. So, and just, you know, really we're just kind of taking laser shots on these guys and just picking guys that we feel like that would have the potential to be Cup drivers in the future.
Are there any particular series or types of cars that you're looking at? Are you looking at guys in micro sprints? Are you looking at guys in late models, or someone's in a modified?
Again, it's that individual. If we feel like that individual fits what kind of, again, for me, it's more feel of like, does he kind of fit the criteria of what we're looking for? Mm-hmm. And that's it. They could come from anywhere. They could, again, Connor Zillich is from go-karts and Luke Finhouse is from super late models. It mm-hmm. doesn't really, we're working with Gavin Bochelle and he's open wheel. Mm-hmm. So they can come from anywhere.
Do you, obviously money helps a lot, and there's a lot of buy a ride going on out there right mm-hmm. now. Is it harder to look for the drivers that say have talent but aren't driving but don't have a lot of money, or is it easier, to be able to see obviously one of these young kids that has a lot of backing behind them and get behind them?
Well, it's a balance. I mean, obviously you have to kind of weigh both of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it certainly takes money to race, no question about it. It's a cruel part of this sport. Because if we had a 16-year-old kid that could throw a baseball 94 miles an hour, he's going to get to play. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He doesn't have to bring a sponsor to play. At this level, we have to, we have to figure out how to balance that and use the resources that each individual driver has, and utilize those resources. And those are part of the decision-making process of where they go, mm-hmm. of what, if they, if we'd like to see them at a certain level, but we don't have the funding, they just can't be at that level. They have to race at a different level. That doesn't mean they eventually won't get to that level.
Right.
But right now, this is where we are, and this is what we have to work with, and this is how it works. So, so there is no set protocol on any of that. It's all by kind of how we feel and how, what fits with what we have to work with.
You've seen, like you said, like so many different decades of the sport. So mm-hmm. you have, came up from where drivers got a ride based on their talent, mm-hmm. and now drivers getting, rides because they're buying the rides. Is that frustrating for you to watch, or is it something that is just it's the nature of the beast now, or part of the game?
Well, the problem is even back in the day, somebody had to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So the money had to come from somewhere. Racing's not free. Right? You've got to pay mechanics and people and build cars. And so, were sponsors easier to get? Maybe. Were there less drivers wanting to come to NASCAR at that time? Probably. It was because you had Indy cars and all that kind of stuff. So, yes. I mean, would it be a perfect world to say, here's an unlimited budget, go hire the best drivers you can hire? I'd love that. Is that reality? There's no way. I mean, it's just no way. I mean, the world doesn't work that way, So the challenges are talent, funding. Mm-hmm. How do we balance that with what we're doing? And that's what we do. And again, it just, I would love to say, go hire the best guys. But I really do believe that we have some incredibly talented guys that do have, backing, some backing. And that's what we try to do, because what happens is even the talented guys will get people, behind them as they move up when people see the talent. Mm-hmm. They'll get local sponsors or regional sponsors or, whatever it is to help them make those transitions up. And we try to utilize that the best we can as we're making them. So, again, it's a bit of a dance, that you're trying to play of trying to get them to the best spots and with the best people and try to figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah, like you said, there's that balance that you go for. You've got these young guys like William Sawalich, mm-hmm. And is there anyone that you haven't gotten yet that's on your radar that you
Well, I'm
really
certainly not going to tell here. So of course, there's people out there that, you're always looking at. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, there are guys that we currently watch and, we keep an eye on and follow. But, I mean, honestly, I really like the guys and the girl we have now. I mean, it's it's a really good group of race car drivers.
The dirt trend is becoming bigger and bigger
Mm-hmm.
to find talent. Do you agree with that?
I just agree. This is what I agree. I agree that really good race car drivers can drive anything. That's what I agree with. And if they come from dirt, hey, listen, Tony Stewart could run, he could run a dirt race on Friday night and a pavement race on Saturday night and another dirt race on Sunday afternoon and win them all. So I just believe really good race car drivers can drive anything. And if they come from dirt, that's great. You know what I mean? I mean, listen, it's a great discipline. The understanding vehicle dynamics and, even for that matter, I worked with Sheldon Creed and, he come from off-road and, that guy can handle a race car as well as anybody. Same with Jimmy. Jimmy was an off-road driver. They just understand the dynamics of how vehicles, go when they're out of shape. They know what to do.
Because you're always on that edge.
You're always on the edge.
No, because I've done off-road races before, and you have to have vehicle control.
And you have to be way ahead of yourself when you're driving, understanding where you are and how it all moves. So, but again, I'm you look at drivers like that, they're just completely, off-road. I kind of look at them as like bull riders, I mean, they're just crazy how they drive those cars. Then you look at a guy like William Byron. He's never done that. He's just race legends. He ran late models.
Started late,
ran East cars. He's a Cup winner.
I know.
I mean, I just don't, there's no pigeonhole of anybody. I think you look at everybody as an individual and you rate them as an individual and what you think their potential is. And that's really kind of how I do it. It's not, the best dirt driver and the best asphalt driver. I mean, once you get in that Cup car, it's all pretty equal then. It's how you utilize, especially the way the Cup Series is now, the way you utilize the parts and pieces that you have, because the guy next to you has the same pieces.
Yeah.
Exactly the same pieces now.
Right. Now they're all the same.
Yeah, now they're the same. So, I don't know. I just think you have to you rate these guys for who they are and where they can go as you see it, and that's what I do.
It's funny that you touch on the Cup cars of the modern era, how they are closer now than they have ever been. Comparing eras, who could you take out of that 90s era, late 80s, early 90s era, or even mid 90s, and possibly drop them in a car in the 60s or late 70s, and for which teams?
Well, for sure you could take Tony Stewart. I mean, he's the modern day A.J. Foyt, and A.J. Foyt did it well. A.J. drove for the Woods brothers back in that era, won the Daytona 500 in 72, won a lot of races. I think he won 7 total NASCAR races, but he didn't run very many. For sure, Tony Stewart. I think Tony Stewart is a champion in any era of racing. I mean, all the way back to the 30s.
You think he would have been a good fit with the Wood brothers?
I think Tony Stewart's a good fit with anybody.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I've watched him race any kind of car. I think he's a good fit for anybody. He could have drove for Junior Johnson, Holman and Moody, like Lorenzen. Any of those teams in that era, Tony Stewart fits. He just, he's just one of the most versatile drivers that I've ever seen. I mean, a guy that you could take anywhere in any kind of car, road course, dirt, doesn't matter, speedway,
he's going to make it go.
He's going to win. And not make it go, he's going to win.
Right.
It's just, again, that goes back to that whole thing of an individual. I just think that's what you're looking for is that, that intangible, I don't know what that is, but, it's kind of like when they say an actor or somebody has it. They have the it factor.
The it factor.
Right? Well, that's the same thing with race car drivers. The guys that are world class, like a Tony Stewart, I think you could put him in any era of racing on any surface, and it could be Indy cars, sprint cars, NASCAR. A guy like that is going to win anywhere. Same thing with AJ Foyt. I mean, if you take the 1962 AJ Foyt and put him in 2022, that guy, he's a superstar.
Okay,
that's my opinion.
You think he could, with someone like a Kyle Larson of the modern era or something like that, could thrive would thrive back in the 70s or something?
Yeah, it just the reason I say yes is because Mario Andretti did. I mean, to me, Kyle Larson is like a modern day Mario Andretti. Like if you took Kyle Larson to F1 and gave him the proper team, the proper testing, and all the tools, he would be competitive in F1. He would. It's
just the fact of, I like to call it the 2/10 factor. Any car they come to, they bring 2/10 to it. You know, it's one of those guys that you know that anything they hop in, they're going to go fast.
They're going to go good. So the era, you know, would there be drivers that are mediocre drivers that were in that 90s era that would struggle with big, heavy cars, no power steering, lots of heat? I mean, yeah, they would struggle. But
you had to wrestle them.
They'd have to wrestle them. But, you know, I mean, I think the drivers have changed a little bit. But I think anytime you take a world-class driver, they're world-class. They can do it all. They can do it. You know, I mean, it's just I think they fit in – I think world-class fits in any era, my opinion.
Well, the big difference between, you know, the cars then and the cars now is now they handle, you know. Do you think now that it is too much of the car and not enough of the driver that we're seeing because the cars handle so well and they're easier to drive than they were back in the day?
Yeah, because the cars are built, you know, you're racing on an aero platform, and then you have the way the tires are, the grip in the tires, you know.
And I'm not just talking in NASCAR. I mean across all forms of racing, because Indy cars handle a lot better now than they did back then. Sprint cars too.
Your phone works better than it worked back then. I mean, technology is technology, right? Yeah. I mean, that's just you know, just how it works. I mean, things get better. We don't, you know, things don't get worse, right? Things get better. We build better things, and so. But again, you know, until the car can be held wide open all the time, there's always room for whatever. You know, if it's on a 1 mile track or a 3/4 mile track or a 1.5 mile track, if you have to lift, you have to drive, right? If you have to lift, you have to drive it. So whatever the discipline is, that's what comes in. Now, is aero and all the platforms that they work on now part of it? It is. But you still have to drive the car. You have to. There's a seat of the pants feel. It's all there. That part never changes. Still 4 tires. It's still a steering wheel. Still a gas and a brake. Right. You still have to shift. Maybe a little bit different, but it's still, the mechanics are the same of it. The disciplines change of, you know, the mechanical disciplines change of what it is. Certain eras created better racing, I think, because the cars were more raw, you know, and there was fast cars and slow cars. And
which eras?
I would say more like in the 80s, 90s were better eras of racing. I mean, you say that, and then you have very close races now, but it just seemed, and again, we were different. It just seemed different then to me. You know, now you still, I mean, you really have good racing. I mean, the races, I got to tell you,
it's great this year. I'm
a huge fan of this next gen car. I think it was overdue to have a car like this, because the technology has gotten out of hand, and all the what it takes to run the cars have gotten out of hand, and the engineering, where you're engineering a part to be the part that it's supposed to do mechanically and become a aero advantage. I mean, all this stuff was just out of hand.
Right, the bodies, the way they were massaging them.
The whole thing is just...
When I was in the K&N and I heard of cars going to the wind tunnel, I was like, are you serious?
No, well, you have short track cars that are doing that now. It's just, all of that stuff is I don't know, it just takes some of the rawness out of racing. And when racing was a bit Not too raw, because then it wasn't that great, and you had cars winning by 5 laps and all that stuff. But when it had, loose parameters rather than such tight parameters that they have now. But the problem is you can't have loose parameters because you have so much engineering and technology that they would exploit all that. Mm-hmm. So I think what NASCAR did is exactly the right thing. I think they built the right car. I think they did it the right way. I think they had the OEMs involved in it, and the manufacturers helped build this car and design it, and look at the racing. I mean, look at a team like Trackhouse, right, which was formerly Ganassi, is now one of the top teams. And, you got to give Justin Marks and all those guys credit for what they've done. And look at Richard Childress. You've got, they've got a couple of wins. You've taken teams that were, you would say, mid-level, and now they're contenders. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Do you still go to Cup races?
I don't, not so much.
No?
But I watch them all. Well, I'm always at a short track.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I mean, like, but I stay up on Cup racing. I have a lot of friends in Cup racing. I watch a lot of it, but there's just not a lot of need for me to go. Not where my head is in this development and working with these young drivers and parents. I like to focus on what I do, and I want to be good at what I do. I can still be a fan of Cup racing, which I am, and I still watch it, and I still listen to the in-car and radio and all that stuff, and so I know what's going on. I don't have to be there to understand what's happening.
When a driver gets to the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series or the Cup Series, do they reach a point where they rise so high it's like, okay, you're not with me anymore?
Yeah.
How high do they go before you are no longer working with them?
Usually what I'll do is I'll hand them off to different agencies. Is what I did in the past. So now I'm more with Chevrolet. So now it'll just be like, well, we get them to a certain point, and then we'll decide what we do with them team-wise, agency-wise, and all that type of thing. So usually truck level would be the level that I would kind of say, okay, we've kind of got you on the path you need to be going, and then I'll start concentrating on the next wave that comes. You know what I mean? So that type of thing. So but I always stay in contact with even, I worked with Sam Mayer since he was 11 years old.
Wow.
So I'm very close with Sam and his dad, and still stay close contact with him and watch every move that he makes. And I'll give my 2 cents if I see something or whatever. But you know what? It's time for them to figure it out now. Mm-hmm. We've laid all the blocks, and we've built the foundation underneath you. It's time for you to go do it. Same with Sheldon Creed. Mm-hmm. I started working with him. He was 15 years old and an off-road racer, and, now he's won an ARCA championship, truck championship, and now he's in Xfinity. Not had a great year, but getting better. Mm-hmm. And I stay in contact with all of them. Even Zane, he's with another manufacturer now, but, I still watch him because I put a lot of effort into him, and he's doing great. Right. He's doing phenomenal. So, I get a lot of pride out of watching these kids do what they do and do their thing.
I know you can't tell us who you're looking at as far as possible prospects, but are there any racetracks in the country that you kind of look at or give your attention to because that's where some talent's coming from? Anything like that?
Well, we obviously did a deal with Luke Fenhouse, so I do watch the Wisconsin racing, Midwest late model racing. I watch it all. I watch it's not like I go to them, but I follow them. You try to watch all the short track racing in this area. I'm at a lot of them. I feel like I'm a huge fan of the Cars Tour and what Jack McNally's doing. The Cars Tour late model stock is as good of short track racing as there is. Mm-hmm. It's at least 15 to 20 deep of cars that you could say could win that race that particular night. And to me, that's where the kids really learn how to race, is in that type of environment. So I'm a huge fan of that. They have the Cars Tour Pro late model that's just kind of getting started. That's got a ways to go, but it has potential. Mm-hmm. That Formula car is a good car, and it's a good car for younger drivers to learn in. Not a lot of power, a lot of grip. So I'm a fan of that. I mean, listen, I follow all the open wheel stuff I can. I follow modifieds. You know, if we see somebody that we think might be a player, then we're gonna follow them and we're gonna talk to them.
Anyone from the modifieds catching your eye?
Not at the moment. Yeah. But hey, you got to watch the 11-year-old kid that won 2 races last week.
Right.
I mean,
oh my God.
I mean, he's 11 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to look.
I know him and his dad.
Yeah.
You know, I'm friendly with them because my nephew raced quarter midgets with them, so they kind of follow each other's careers. But
right.
What he did for the past 2 nights at North Wilkesboro,
incredible,
winning against all those cars.
I mean, it's unreal.
Right.
Yeah. So you got to watch. I'm a huge Matt Hirschman fan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I've watched him forever, and
But is he too old?
He's too old. Yeah, okay. But I still be a fan.
Do you have an age cap?
Yeah, I mean, for what I'm doing now, it's very young.
Really?
Teenage.
So under 20 is your age cap.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, okay,
but not to say that you wouldn't help somebody if they were the right guy. I mean, but I'm just saying as far as looking for junior drivers,
mm-hmm.
you know, we're kind of in the teenage years.
Now, are there any parents that are sending you like highlight reels of their kids saying, "Hey, please take my kid," or "Please coach my kid"?
Oh no. I mean, I do get calls like that,
mm-hmm.
And I do help people outside of the Chevrolet thing. If somebody needs my help, I'm going to help them.
Okay.
I mean, I just think you have to do that for the sport. I just think that as much as a sport has given me, I have to give back. If people call me, I always try to help them. If I can't be, you know, I try to give them as much help as I can. Let's
mm-hmm.
put it that way. I try to do the best I can to help them.
Okay,
yeah.
That's the honorable thing.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about some of the older stuff from back in the days,
mm-hmm.
the 80s,
mm-hmm.
the 70s. Like, what are some of your favorite memories or stories from different wins or just times with, you know, having your own racing or having your dad's racing team?
You know, I can just remember being in school, being in like junior high. This would have been right around like 1979, right? I just could not wait for the weekend. I just could not wait to get on that airplane. My dad had his own plane, and to be at the racetrack all weekend. I just couldn't. That's the first feeling.
So Friday after school let out, you were on the plane going somewhere?
Yeah, usually probably Saturday morning. Usually, yeah, Saturday morning we'd fly to Charlotte, or we'd fly to North Wilkesboro, we'd fly to Texas, or we'd fly to Michigan or wherever. But I just couldn't wait to be there for the weekend. You know, I loved every minute of it as a kid. And what was cool for me was I was so into it that I had to have my face in every conversation. You know, if my dad had a conversation with Waddell Wilson and Buddy Baker, I had to listen to it. Mm-hmm. I was that engaged in it. So that's like my earliest memory. And then always every day, I just remember, you know, I'd go to my dad's office and we would just talk about racing. And then even at night, you know, when I was 13, 14 years old, like I didn't want to go hang out with my friends. I wanted to talk to my dad. Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk about racing. That's all I wanted to talk about. And you know what's really funny is, you know, I'm in my 50s now, right? And I still have that same passion as I did when I was 14. Like, it's every day I want to talk about racing. I want to be around racing. That's all I want to do.
Right.
And I don't know what that is. That's an obsession. If it's unhealthy, I don't know. But that's my life. And I was that way then. And so I'm leading up to kind of the biggest moment. So the biggest moment was, you know, we ran Lenny Pond in 78. I went to a few of those races. I was only like 12, 13 at that year.
You won with Lenny Pond at Talladega.
At Talladega, 1978. That was our first win. But we ran Lenny the whole year, right? Or most of the year, maybe not all the races. And we won the race with him, and I actually wasn't there for that in Talladega. I can't remember what I had going on, but I didn't go to that, and I was like devastated. I just didn't think we'd win because we'd had an average year, and Lenny was a really good guy, and he was actually a really good short track driver. You know, he's from Richmond area, and he was great at Richmond, and he's good at Martinsville, and, you know, really, really good short track driver, good at North Wilkesboro. But he just really wasn't the driver for the team that we had. He just really wasn't the right guy for that team. Mm-hmm. So I went to a few of those. But then we got Buddy Baker the next year, And that's when we had the Gray Ghost, the first
Oh,
year
yeah,
with the Gray
the
Ghost.
Teflon car, right?
Well, no, not that one. The first one was Spectra
That
oil.
was it.
That's where the paint scheme came from, was Spectra oil. It was like a kind of like a first synthetic oil, or one of the first synthetic oils.
Okay.
Say the first one I knew of. And so we went to Daytona with Baker, and we ended up winning the inaugural Busch Clash, right? That was a big deal.
Is that the Le Mans car?
No. So Oldsmobile.
Oldsmobile.
Yeah, the Le Mans didn't come till '81.
Okay.
So we won the first Busch Clash. So that was it's a big deal. At that time, it was 1979, so it was 50 miles for 50,000. Big deal then.
Huge money.
Huge money.
Yeah.
For a 20-lap race.
Right. For back then?
50 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of money in 1979.
So was your dad like one of the? You said that he chased the big races. They
raced the
didn't
big ones.
Did they also? They obviously went for the big money races too.
Well, they were all. I mean, that was all the same. So it was just at that year. I think with Baker, 1979, we ran like 22 races of the 29 they ran or something. We wouldn't go to North Wilkesboro, and we did go to Martinsville because we actually won it that year, 1979. But we just kind of went to the big races, and that was it, and that was, he ended up winning. We won that race, and we ended up having electrical issues in the 500. That was the race where they had the spin and the fight with Cale and Donnie. Mm-hmm. We should have won that race. We had by far the fastest car, but we had an ignition problem, and we were on the pole. And but anyway, that year we won Atlanta, and we won Michigan, and then we won Martinsville, I think.
3 wins in a season for a part-time team is not bad.
Yeah. And the Busch Clash.
Yeah.
Won that as well. So that was it. But the biggest moment for me was the 1980 Daytona 500. I was 14 years old. And so it's funny. So I was like the gas runner, right? So, they dumped the gas in the car. And so you'd have to take the cans back to Unocal, fill them up, and you had to get the exact number of how much it took. So I'd take that back to Waddell, and he would figure the fuel mileage. Mm-hmm. So I'll never forget. We had the dominant car. I mean, the thing was so fast. That was the Gray Ghost, and I'll never forget this feeling. I can feel it like it happened today. After the last stop, I went back to the hauler. We had to kind of first customize hauler. It was nice. And I just remember in the hauler, and I was like curled up, vibrating, just
nervous.
Yeah, nervous,
really?
Shaking, just like I can't believe we're going to win the Daytona 500. I cannot. I know something's going to happen, and this was like the last bit of the race, and we'd led the whole race, the whole day.
Oh, you guys are the dominant car.
Dominant car. He led 140 something laps, right, of the race, and it was just like the last, and I'm like in the hauler, just like 14 years old, just like I just remember that feeling of like, we got to win this race, and so we did. We won the race, right, and then the next feeling that I had was, we did the victory lane thing and took the pictures, and so they're, everything's quieted down, and everybody's left, and they're pushing the car from victory lane to tech, right? And I'm holding the trophy. I'm walking next to the car.
Holding the Daytona 500.
Holding the Daytona 500.
That's so
I was
cool.
14 years old. That was 1980.
God.
So that's how long I've been. So if you want to say a memory for me, like the memory of racing, like I don't know if it really gets any better than that. That may be the euphoric moment of the nervousness, the feeling of just like I can't take it. I mean, we're just a family from Kentucky that loves racing, and been involved in it off and on at that point for 20 years. At that point,
surreal moment.
It's a surreal moment that we're going to win the Daytona 500, and that was my dad's goal. Was like, I want to win Daytona. Daytona is it. Mm-hmm. That's what, and he ended up winning it 3 times. Should have and had a shot to win it 6 times. And
They won it three times. Once
Baker,
with Baker,
and
Kale,
back to back with Kale.
back to back with Kale.
83, 84.
Oh wait, so Kale's flip was when your dad's car,
Yes,
right?
it was. Yeah, that was that. You want a funny story?
Okay.
So funny story. So it's 1983. So Waddell. I mean, honestly, a master, a mechanical master. Waddell Wilson, mechanical master. I mean, from building engines to how the bodies were on the cars, and just understanding air and horsepower, and at that time, people didn't know all this stuff, and he understood how the windshield need to be angled to get the right cowl pressure to create the most vacuum, and people just didn't know that then. There wasn't engineering.
Those guys were artists.
They were artists.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So it's amazing what he had done. The year before, he with Benny Parsons. We had Benny Parsons in 1982, and he was the first car with Benny driving for my dad. 1982, the 28 car at Talladega went 200 miles an hour in qualifying. First car to officially go 200 in qualifying. Now, Buddy Baker went 200 like 10 years before
in a
test. But Benny was the first car to officially qualify over 200.
Right.
So nobody had run 200 at Daytona. So this was the next February. So we went. It's kind of two surreal moments. So we had a test in Daytona in January of '83, and we had that Pontiac Le Mans, and then we had this brand new Chevy SS with the nose, the new nose. So Cale wanted to test both cars, but he wanted to feel the car in a draft, right? So we had to have another driver. So my dad and Cale and everyone were really good friends with A.J. Foyt. So we had A.J. come down and test. Mind you, these are private tests again, right? Just us.
Right, at Daytona.
Okay. Right? So I'll never forget this day, ever. And it's like that 1980 thing. So it's 1983, January 1983. I'm 17, senior in high school. And so when they go draft, I told my dad, I said, I want to drive around and watch from the front, so I can see the whole track. Never forget this. So, there's nobody there. So I drive all the way around to the back of the grandstand, and I walk through the grandstand, and I get in the flag stand. And I'm like, this is the first time Cale had ever tested for us, and AJ had never, done anything for us. And I'm like, we've got Cale Yarborough and AJ Foyt testing our cars today. And I'm in the flag stand. I wish I had a camera, something to document it. I'm in the flag stand watching those two guys draft our cars at Daytona in a test. I was just like, I'll never forget this day. Like, that's just, when it comes to racing, at that point, AJ had won 4 Indianapolis 500, Cale had won 3 championships and all that stuff. I mean, all that stuff was fresh. Mm-hmm. They were the superstars of that era, right? And so what was funny was Cale decided to run the Chevrolet Monte Carlo over the Pontiac Le Mans, and AJ goes, "Hey Harry, you let me drive that Le Mans, I'll win the race." This thing will fly.
AJ said that.
I said that because he was in the Le Mans,
right?
And Cale drove both of them, and then AJ went in the Le Mans and drafted with him. But after Cale drove the Chevy, he said, "I want to race the Chevy." So that's what we did. So the next story. So we're really fast in practice. We go out to qualify. And so at Daytona, 45 flat is 200 miles an hour. Okay. 45.00 is exactly 200 miles an hour on a 2.5 mile racetrack. Okay. So I know the number, right? I know what we got to run. So we're at the start finish line. He takes off, leaves, comes by, gets the green, and I've got my stopwatch.
This is qualifying or
qualifying?
Qualifying.
Okay. This is qualifying for the 500.
Okay.
So I've got my stopwatch, and I'm right at the line, right? And it's like anything under 45 flat is 200, and 200 was a big deal then, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody'd ever run 200 at Daytona. So he comes by, boom! I'm pushing the watch. I mean, everybody else is timing as well, right? But it's like I'm going to see exactly what he runs. Doing exactly on the line. I mean, they've got the timing and scoring, but it's not like it is today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So comes around, and I'm looking right at the line. Boom, I hit the watch. Never forget. It said 4:4:79. Now, I don't know what he officially ran. I don't know the exact time, but I know what I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at that moment, I didn't miss it by 0.2. We broke 200 miles an hour.
Right.
Right? Okay. So we're going crazy, right? High fives, chest bumps, right? We're going nuts, crazy, right? Just jumping up and down and, hugging each other. And guess what? He never came back. It was like all that joy went to and then we hear, the fans are like, the cars. We couldn't see it because we're on pit road.
Right.
So there was no video. There was nothing. He just gets loose. The front windshield comes out of it after it gets loose.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then the spoilers laid back like that. I'm like the rear spoilers like that.
Okay.
He just got loose. It was gusty. It was windy. I mean, he just lost it.
He's just on the edge.
He's just on the edge. And they said from if you would time turn 3 to turn 3 before he started getting loose, it was 203 miles an hour. So if he would have completed that lap, he would have been on the pole by 5 miles an hour. Second place was 198.
Who was second? Do you remember?
Ricky Rudd, which he ended up getting the pole.
Okay.
Because we had to withdraw the car because it was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So we go back and get, which just has a whole big, people think it's a show car that was setting at a Hardee's, which is not true. We go back to the shop and get the Pontiac, right, and bring it back down, prep it, run it in the qualifying race, finishes third in the qualifying race, run the 500, and he wins the 500 in the Pontiac. And he did a slingshot on Buddy Baker on the last lap.
Yeah.
Cale Yarborough.
That I remember.
Slingshot, and he won the 500 in the backup car.
You guys had you'd run the 28 car. You'd won back-to-back in it. Was it something that you guys had figured out, because you had Waddell Wilson working on the car? You also had Robert Yates.
Well,
you had
Yates come much later.
Oh, he did?
He come later, yeah. So Waddell from 79 through 86, Waddell was the crew chief and engine builder and team manager, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he ran the whole show. He was in charge of everything at the shop. And so in 1986, Cale left and Waddell left to go work with Darrell Waltrip at Hendrick. That's what they called the Dream Team back in 1987.
Waddell and Darrell.
Okay. At Hendrick. And that number 17 Tide car.
Right.
And so when Waddell left, my dad hired Robert Yates. And that was at the very end of 86. So he actually did a couple of races with Cale in 86. And then in 87, end of 86, we hired Davey and did the whole Texaco Haviland thing. And
Gotcha.
And then we owned the car from 87, when it was Texaco, when Davey drove 87, 88, and then at the end of 88, my dad sold the team to Robert Yates, and that's how Robert Yates Racing became. It was Renier Racing, and it just turned into Robert Yates Racing.
Right.
Same shop, same people, same everything. My dad just sold him the team.
Okay.
My dad was in some financial issues in the coal business up in Kentucky, so he wanted to make sure that he just wanted to make sure that Robert and Davey continued on. So he did everything he could to make sure that continued, and it did. It was amazing.
Yeah, they made such an incredible combination.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but the guys that you had associated with you over the years, I mean, some of the moments that you guys were involved in.
Unreal.
Because you guys were even involved in Richard Petty's 200th win.
Well, I'd like
is that a race you want back?
I'd like to have it back, yeah.
All right, come on. Tell us the story about that, because there's that famous picture of Cale and Richard.
The way the race, this race is on YouTube. Anybody can watch it. Mm-hmm. Cale was kind of setting him up for a slingshot move on the last lap, and a caution came out with like 2 to go. And so he had to make the move where he didn't really want to make the move, and he went into 3 too hard and got loose, and then Richard got underneath him.
Crisscross.
Kind of, cross back, and they just kind of raced to the line, and Richard beat him to the line, just by, that much.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, it was a big day because I never forget. I was probably about 18 or 19 at the time, and we were going to get to meet President Reagan.
Right.
My dad was so upset. We said, "Oh, we're going home. We're not going to the picnic." They called it a picnic. They had Kentucky Fried Chicken and all kinds of KFC and all stuff, and for the president. And I do regret that. I mean, you know, you win some, you lose some. To be a part of Richard's 200th win, it was his last win. You know, all that's a big deal. You know,
well, the other part of it too is what people don't realize is there's that iconic picture with Richard and Air Force One in the background, but there's also another shot with Cale in Air Force One. Too.
I have it in my house.
Yeah,
I have it in my house. Yeah, I do.
People don't realize.
Yeah,
is, you know, there's more than one car with that photo with Air Force One.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool to be a part of that and get to, you know, I got to live that. I mean, that was my childhood, basically my teen years, and it's so much fun. I mean, I wouldn't change one day of it. It was just thank the good Lord every day that I get to, you know, have those memories, and then I get to do what I get to do today. To, you know, so it's just incredible. Honestly, it's so much fun and so many great memories with the 28 car and all the cool people that work there, and just so much fun. You know,
I could see it in your face. You have that genuine love for it. You know, you've got millions of stories, and we could probably sit here for hours. I always ask this of every guest: would you come back again? Because we always love to have a part two. We always love hearing more of those stories from over the years, and we really want to thank you for coming in. You know, what you've done in the sport has been incredible, and your longevity in the sport has just been amazing as well. Thank you for coming in today. We definitely appreciate it. We'd love to have you back.
anytime. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Lorin Ranier joins us on the Derek Pernesiglio Show. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and like always, we'll see you the next time. Bye.